11 bizarre old Hollywood stories that are 100% real. The glittering world of old Hollywood seems like a distant dream now, a place of unmatched glamour, larger-than-life stars, and movie magic that transformed entertainment forever. But behind the carefully crafted studio publicity and those immaculate silver screen images lurked a reality far stranger than any script their writers could dream up. The truth about Hollywood's golden age isn't just about secret scandals or hidden love affairs. It's about the genuinely bizarre, sometimes dangerous, and utterly outlandish behavior that was carefully concealed from the adoring public. These weren't just quirky celebrity habits, they were genuinely shocking incidents and behaviors that would be unimaginable in today's entertainment industry. From deadly on-set accidents that were hushed up for decades to the disturbing behind-the-scenes treatment of performers, from macabre home decorating choices to strange personal obsessions that bordered on madness, old Hollywood harbored secrets that even today's most scandalous celebrities would find hard to believe. What makes these stories particularly fascinating isn't just their strangeness, but the fact that they're all completely true. No embellishment needed, no exaggeration required. The reality of old Hollywood was often more bizarre than the fiction it created. Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain on 11 of the most bizarre, shocking, and utterly true stories from Hollywood's golden age. Tales that the studio publicity departments worked overtime to keep hidden, but which time has finally revealed in all their strange glory. Let's begin with a story about the most famous lion in cinema history, and how he nearly turned his human co-workers into an unexpected meal. 1. A lion almost killed the MGM mascot crew. When you see the famous MGM lion roaring at the beginning of a classic film, you're witnessing something far more dangerous than most viewers realize. Unlike today's digitally created mascots, Leo the lion was very real, and so were the dangers faced by the brave, or perhaps foolish, film crew tasked with capturing his performance. The original lion used for the MGM logo was named Slats, followed by several successors, including the most famous, Jackie. These weren't trained Hollywood animals accustomed to cameras and lights. They were wild predators brought in specifically to create the studio's iconic opening sequence. During one of the early filming sessions in the 1920s, something went terribly wrong. The lion, agitated by the unfamiliar environment, bright lights, and the noise of the equipment, suddenly lunged directly at the camera crew. The 400-pound predator broke free of his restraints and charged the terrified cameramen. The roar was real. So was the near-death experience, recalled a studio technician who witnessed the incident. 1 minute they were adjusting the camera, the next they were diving behind sandbags while this massive animal tried to turn them into lunch. The quick-thinking crew members managed to save themselves by seeking shelter behind heavy equipment and sandbags that had been placed on set, thankfully not for this specific scenario, but as standard lighting equipment. The lion's trainer eventually regained control of the animal, but not before several minutes of absolute terror. What's particularly shocking about this incident is how completely it was kept from the public. MGM had invested heavily in creating their majestic opening logo, and news that their mascot had nearly devoured their film crew would have transformed their symbol of Hollywood greatness into a punchline overnight. The studio heads ordered absolute silence about what happened, explained a film historian who uncovered documentation of the incident decades later. Everyone involved had to sign agreements never to discuss it. MGM was selling movie magic. The last thing they wanted was the public thinking about real danger every time they saw their logo. This wouldn't be the last dangerous encounter with the MGM Lions. Jackie, who served as the roaring mascot throughout the 1930s and 40s, was reportedly sedated during later filming sessions, a precaution that became standard practice after several other close calls that similarly never made it into the press. The next time you see that famous lion roaring before a classic MGM film, remember, you're witnessing a moment of genuine danger captured on film, a wild predator just seconds away from potential disaster, all in service of creating the perfect Hollywood image. 2. A real human skeleton was used in Poltergeist. The 1982 horror classic Poltergeist terrified audiences with its supernatural tale of a family haunted by malevolent spirits. But the film's most disturbing element wasn't created through special effects or makeup, it was entirely real. During the infamous swimming pool scene, actress JoBeth Williams finds herself struggling in a pool filled with skeletons that appear to be movie props. Years after the film's release, Williams revealed a shocking truth. Those weren't plastic replicas or carefully crafted models. They were actual human remains. Hollywood saved a buck by using a corpse, noted a production designer who worked in the industry during this period. It sounds unbelievable today, but using real skeletons was actually cheaper than creating realistic fake ones. Medical supply companies sold them, and prop departments kept them in inventory. This macabre cost-cutting measure wasn't just disturbing, it was kept completely secret from most of the cast and crew. Williams herself didn't learn the truth until after filming had concluded. In interviews years later, she expressed her horror at discovering she had been swimming with actual human remains rather than props. "I would have never agreed to that," Williams stated in a 1988 interview. "There's something deeply disturbing about using someone's remains as a prop without proper respect or acknowledgement. But that was Hollywood then. The end result on screen was all that mattered." What makes this story particularly chilling is that Poltergeist became famous for its supposed curse, a series of tragedies that befell several cast members in the years following its release. Some superstitious film buffs have suggested that the disrespectful use of real human remains may have contributed to this alleged curse. The practice of using real skeletons wasn't unique to Poltergeist. Throughout the 1970s and early 80s, numerous films utilized actual human remains for scenes requiring skeletons, including Dawn of the Dead and several pirate movies. The practice only ended when artificial skeletons finally became more cost-effective and ethical concerns were raised. "Today, this would never happen," explained a modern special effects supervisor. "Beyond the obvious ethical issues, there would be legal complications, insurance problems, and probably protests. But in that era, filmmakers were focused on what looked most realistic on screen, not the moral implications." The next time you watch Poltergeist, remember that the horror you're witnessing isn't entirely fictional. Those skeletons surrounding JoBeth Williams were once actual people, pressed into service as movie props long after their deaths.
Easiest girl in town.
3. Marlene Dietrich insisted on ice cubes from Paris. Marlene Dietrich wasn't just one of Hollywood's most glamorous stars. She was perhaps its most demanding when it came to maintaining her European sophistication in the California wilderness that was early Hollywood. Her most notorious demand? She refused to drink anything unless it was chilled with ice cubes imported directly from Paris, France. In an era before reliable refrigeration and when air travel was still a luxury few experienced, this demand created logistical nightmares for studio staff. Yet Paramount Pictures, desperate to keep their German-born star happy, actually complied with this extraordinary request. Her cocktails traveled farther than her co-stars, quipped a studio assistant who worked during Dietrich's heyday. Every week someone had to coordinate with contacts in Paris to have ice harvested, packed in insulated containers, and flown across the Atlantic, then transported across the country to Hollywood. Also, Dietrich could have her properly chilled martini. The reasoning behind this bizarre demand wasn't entirely about taste. Dietrich claimed that American ice had an unpleasant flavor that ruined her drinks. But those close to the star revealed the real motivation was more about maintaining her European mystique and exercising power over the studio system. "It was a power play, pure and simple," explained a biographer who studied Dietrich's career. She knew it was an absurd request, but she also knew that if the studio would accommodate something this ridiculous, they would never deny her more substantial demands regarding scripts, co-stars, or directors. What makes this story particularly revealing is how it demonstrates the extraordinary lengths studios would go to placate their valuable stars in the contract era. When actors were studio property, signed to exclusive long-term contracts, keeping them happy became a necessary business expense, no matter how bizarre their requests. The ice cube demand wasn't Dietrich's only eccentricity. She also reportedly insisted that all her food be prepared by a French chef, that her dressing rooms be completely redecorated between films, and that studio drivers take specific routes to avoid what she considered unlucky streets in Los Angeles. Studios calculated that indulging these whims was cheaper than dealing with a star who refused to work, noted a film historian. When you had millions invested in a production built around a specific actress, spending a few thousand on flying in French ice cubes suddenly seemed reasonable. Dietrich's ice cube obsession continued for years, until World War II made such extravagances impossible. When transatlantic flights were suspended during the war, she reportedly had to adjust to American ice, though assistants claimed she never stopped complaining about it until her dying day. 4. Alfred Hitchcock gave his actress real birds for a week. Alfred Hitchcock's 1963 horror masterpiece, The Birds, features some of cinema's most terrifying attack sequences, as flocks of birds inexplicably turn against humans in a small coastal town. Star Tippi Hedren, in her first major film role, believed these scenes would be created safely using mechanical birds and special effects. She was catastrophically wrong. For the film's climactic attic attack scene, Hitchcock had promised Hedren that mechanical birds would be used. When she arrived on set that Monday morning, she discovered the horrifying truth. The director had ordered live birds to be thrown at her repeatedly for 5 straight days. He called it directing. She called it abuse, said a crew member who witnessed the filming. They threw ravens, pigeons, and gulls at her for hours on end. The birds were confused and terrified, which made them more aggressive. They pecked at her face, caught in her hair, scratched her with their claws. It wasn't filmmaking, it was torture. Hedren later revealed that the birds were attached to her costume with elastic bands to ensure they stayed near her, while bird handlers in protective gear threw additional birds at her throughout the filming. One bird nearly pecked her eye, missing by mere millimeters. By the 5th day, she was physically and emotionally devastated. "I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown," Hedren would later write in her memoir. "After 5 days of this, I was so exhausted I couldn't move. A doctor was called and told Hitchcock I needed a week's rest. His response was to demand I continue filming. When a physician finally intervened, declaring Hedren too traumatized to continue, Hitchcock reluctantly gave her a week to recover before completing the film. She returned to set only because she was contractually obligated, but the experience permanently damaged their working relationship. What makes this incident particularly disturbing is how it reveals Hitchcock's notorious obsession with his leading ladies crossing the line from artistic control into physical abuse. This wasn't just a director pushing an actress for a better performance, it was a calculated infliction of genuine terror and pain. Hitchcock believed he owned his actresses, explained a film historian specializing in the director's work. He didn't just want to film Hedren being attacked by birds, he wanted to film her actually experiencing fear, pain, and exhaustion. The line between directing and sadism completely disappeared. The incident remained largely hidden from the public for years, with studio publicity focusing instead on Hitchcock's genius and Hedren's breakthrough performance. Only decades later did the full truth emerge about the genuine trauma captured on film and marketed as mere entertainment. Hedren's experience was not unique. Other Hitchcock actresses, including Janet Leigh in Psycho, reported similar manipulation and psychological torment, all in service of capturing what Hitchcock considered authentic fear on camera, regardless of the human cost.
No, I don't think I will kiss you. Although you need kissing badly. That's what's wrong with you. You should be kissed and often, and by someone who knows how.
5. Clark Gable's bad breath almost shut down Gone with the Wind. Clark Gable may have been Hollywood's king and one of its most desired leading men, but his romantic co-stars faced a challenge that audiences never suspected. His breath was reportedly so foul that it made intimate scenes nearly unbearable. The problem stemmed from Gable's dental issues. By his mid-30s, the actor had already lost most of his natural teeth due to poor dental hygiene and a serious gum infection, requiring him to wear dentures. These artificial teeth, combined with his heavy smoking and drinking habits, created what one co-star described as the smell of decay emanating from his mouth. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, this issue reached crisis level when Vivien Leigh, playing Scarlett O'Hara to Gable's Rhett Butler, found herself unable to complete their romantic scenes without physical distress. "He smelled like a corpse. She acted through tears," recalled a makeup artist who worked on the production. Vivien would literally vomit between takes during their kissing scenes. She'd rush off set retching, clean herself up, apply fresh lipstick, and force herself back into his arms for another take. The situation became so severe that producer David O. Selznick was forced to intervene, approaching Gable about the issue in what surely ranks as one of Hollywood's most uncomfortable conversations. Gable, already sensitive about his dentures, which he believed made him look older, was reportedly humiliated by the confrontation. Selznick was desperate. explained a film historian. Here he had the most expensive film ever made at that point. His two stars couldn't complete romantic scenes without one getting physically ill, and the whole production was falling behind schedule because of it. Something had to give. The solution came in the form of a studio dentist who created new, more hygienic dentures for Gable and prescribed special mouthwash and breath fresheners that the actor was required to use multiple times daily. Additionally, the shooting schedule was rearranged to minimize the number of consecutive romantic scenes, giving Lee recovery time between them. What makes this story particularly fascinating is how completely it was concealed from the public. While fans swooned over the palpable chemistry between Gable and Lee, believing them to be the embodiment of romantic passion, the reality on set involved breath mints, strategic camera angles to minimize direct face-to-face contact, and a leading lady fighting nausea throughout their most iconic scenes. It's the perfect example of movie magic versus reality, noted a classic film expert. Millions of women dreamed of being kissed by Clark Gable, completely unaware that the experience would have been traumatic in reality. The gap between Gable's romantic image and his physical condition was one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets. The breath issue continued to plague Gable throughout his career, with other leading ladies reportedly requesting reduced kissing scenes or specific accommodations when cast opposite him. However, his immense star power and the studio's protective publicity machine ensured this embarrassing detail remained hidden until long after his death.
Said that, you know, it's a kind word in a hard, cruel world. The news has just come through from Hollywood that you've been nominated for an Academy Award. Yes.
6. Errol Flynn kept a coffin in his home and slept in it. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star known for his roles in Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, lived a life of excess both on and off screen. But perhaps his most macabre eccentricity was his choice of bedroom furniture, a full-sized coffin in which he regularly slept. Flynn didn't just keep the coffin as a conversation piece or Gothic decoration. According to multiple sources, including his own autobiography and accounts from frequent houseguests, he actually used it as his preferred sleeping arrangement, claiming it was the only place he felt truly rested. Swashbuckler by day, Dracula by night, remarked a studio publicist who visited Flynn's home in the 1940s. The first time I saw it, I thought it was some bizarre joke. Then I realized he was completely serious. He had his regular bed, but he preferred the coffin. Houseguests were horrified when they discovered this wasn't just a prop, but his actual sleeping choice. Flynn's explanation for this unusual preference varied depending on his audience. To some, he claimed it helped him connect with mortality and appreciate each day more fully. To others, he suggested it was the perfect cure for his insomnia, as the confined space made him feel secure. To women he was pursuing, he often presented it as evidence of his adventurous, boundary-pushing nature. He liked shocking people, explained a biographer who studied Flynn's life. The coffin served multiple purposes for him. It was partly a genuine comfort thing. He did seem to sleep better in it, but it was also a performance piece, a way of cultivating his image as someone who lived dangerously and wasn't bound by conventional behavior. What makes this story particularly revealing is how it reflects Flynn's complex relationship with mortality. Despite his vibrant on-screen persona and legendary appetite for life's pleasures, the actor was plagued by health problems from a relatively young age. He suffered from malaria, tuberculosis, and eventually heart disease, dying at just 50 after years of hard living. Flynn knew he was burning his candle at both ends, noted a film historian. The coffin wasn't just eccentric decoration. It was a manifestation of his awareness that he was killing himself with his lifestyle. There was something almost honest about it, like he was acknowledging where his choices were leading him. The coffin wasn't Flynn's only unusual home feature. He reportedly also maintained a hidden room behind his library, where he kept souvenirs from his various romantic conquests. And his yacht, the Zaka, was notorious for its wild parties and strange rituals Flynn would conduct while at sea. When Flynn died in 1959, many expected him to be buried in his personal coffin as a final act of eccentricity. Instead, the actor was laid to rest in a conventional casket, the famous sleeping coffin apparently lost in the settlement of his estate, a mundane end to one of Hollywood's most bizarre personal habits.
Nights I used to tend bar.
Would you entertain a proposition to direct this picture?
7. W.C. Fields hated children so much, he shot at them with BBs. Comedian W.C. Fields built his career on playing misanthropic characters who especially detested children. What audiences didn't realize was that this wasn't just an act. Fields genuinely couldn't stand children, and his methods of dealing with them crossed lines that would be unthinkable today. According to multiple sources, including neighbors and visitors to his home, Fields kept a BB gun near his window and would use it to fire at neighborhood children who played too loudly near his property. "Grumpy old man? Try full-on menace," said the son of a former Fields neighbor who grew up near the comedian's Los Angeles home. "My father told me they lived in terror of Mr. Fields. He wouldn't just yell at kids to get off his lawn, he'd actually shoot at them with his BB gun if they made too much noise." Parents in the neighborhood warned their children to stay far away from his house. While the BBS weren't lethal, they could certainly cause pain and minor injuries, making Fields' behavior not just eccentric, but genuinely harmful. Yet because of his celebrity status and the different standards of the era, this behavior was largely dismissed as the harmless eccentricity of a curmudgeonly comedian. Fields wasn't secretive about his dislike for children, explained a biographer who studied the comedian's life. In interviews, he would openly say things like, "Children should be seen and not heard, and not seen too much either." But what the public thought was a funny exaggeration for his act was actually a genuine sentiment he acted upon in disturbing ways. This hostility toward children wasn't limited to his private life. On movie sets, Fields was notorious for being cruel to child actors. During the filming of It's a Gift, he reportedly reduced his young co-star to tears multiple times with his harsh treatment and refusal to interact with her off-camera. What makes this story particularly striking is how Fields managed to transform his genuine antisocial behavior into a marketable comic persona. While today, a celebrity firing projectiles at children would face legal consequences and public condemnation, Fields converted his misanthropy into a successful brand. He was honest about who he was, at least, noted a film historian. Unlike many stars who presented wholesome public images while behaving terribly in private, Fields put his nastiness right out front. His famous quote, "Anyone who hates children and dogs can't be all bad," wasn't a joke. It was his actual philosophy. Fields' well-documented alcoholism likely contributed to his behavior. By some accounts, he consumed 2 quarts of hard liquor daily during certain periods of his life, a habit that surely exacerbated his intolerance for noise and disruption, particularly from children. The next time you watch Fields' comedic performances where he's tormented by awful children, remember, you're not watching an actor pretending to dislike kids. You're watching a man who disliked them so intensely, he was willing to shoot at them for the crime of playing too loudly near his home. 8. The Wizard of Oz set was basically a death trap. The Wizard of Oz remains one of cinema's most beloved fantasies, bringing joy to generations with its colorful characters and timeless message that there's no place like home. But behind the Technicolor magic lurked a production so dangerous, it's a wonder the cast survived to attend the premiere. The troubles began with the Tin Man. Actor Buddy Ebsen was originally cast in the role, but after 9 days of filming, he was rushed to the hospital struggling to breathe. The aluminum powder in his silver makeup had coated his lungs, nearly killing him and forcing him to withdraw from the production. His replacement, Jack Haley, fared only marginally better when the makeup was reformulated, still suffering from severe eye infections that required ongoing medical treatment. It was magic on screen, and a horror show behind it, recounted a studio technician who worked on the film. The makeup department didn't really understand the toxicity of what they were using. They were more concerned with how things looked on camera than whether they might poison the actors. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West, suffered perhaps the most terrifying accident during production. During a scene where she was to disappear in a burst of flame and smoke, a trapdoor malfunctioned. The copper-based green makeup on her face ignited, causing second-degree burns on her face and third-degree burns on her hand. She required 6 weeks of recovery before returning to the set. "She was literally on fire," said a witness to the accident. "Her makeup was copper-based, which is highly flammable, and when the special effect went wrong, her face caught fire. You could hear her screaming in pain even as they rushed to help her. It's a miracle she didn't lose her eyesight." The flying monkeys faced their own peril. The actors portraying these winged servants were suspended by piano wires that occasionally snapped, sending them plummeting to the hard studio floor. Several performers were injured in falls, with one reportedly breaking both legs when his wire failed during a scene. Even Judy Garland wasn't spared the production's dangers. To maintain her character's youthful appearance, the 16-year-old actress was put on a regimen of diet pills, appetite suppressants, and amphetamines, followed by sleeping pills to counteract the stimulants. beginning a cycle of substance dependency that would plague her throughout her life. The studio doctor would hand out pills like candy, explained a film historian who studied the production. Uppers to get through the grueling 16-hour shooting days, downers to sleep afterward. They were essentially drugging a teenage girl to meet production demands, with no concern for the long-term consequences. The Munchkin actors, contrary to long-standing Hollywood rumors, were not engaged in drunken orgies, but they did face their own challenges. Many were paid less than Dorothy's dog Toto, housed in substandard accommodations, and treated as curiosities rather than professional actors. What makes The Wizard of Oz production particularly shocking by modern standards is how these dangerous conditions were considered acceptable sacrifices for art. There were no safety protocols, no regulatory oversight, and minimal concern for performer well-being in the rush to create a visual spectacle. Today, any one of these incidents would shut down a production pending investigation, noted a modern film safety consultant. The makeup would require toxicity testing, the special effects would need multiple safety backups, and the wire work would demand rigorous testing and safety harnesses. The Wizard of Oz set was essentially an unregulated danger zone by current standards. That this beloved children's classic emerged from such hazardous conditions is perhaps Hollywood's most impressive special effect of all.
Oh, I love E.T.
Oh my God, okay. Okay, that you just made my night.
Good.
You just made my night because you know what?
9. Shirley Temple was allegedly targeted by the Vatican. Shirley Temple remains the definitive child star, the dimpled, curly-haired performer whose innocent charm captivated Depression-era audiences and made her one of Hollywood's biggest box office draws before she reached age 10. But her unprecedented success created skeptics in unexpected places, including, surprisingly, the Vatican. In one of old Hollywood's strangest controversies, a Vatican publication allegedly published an article in the 1930s suggesting that Temple wasn't actually a child at all, but a disguised adult dwarf. The publication reportedly claimed that no genuine child could possibly possess such polished performance skills, timing, and audience awareness. Hollywood's darling, suspected of being a 30-year-old imposter, summarized a film historian who uncovered references to this bizarre accusation. The article suggested she was a midget, their term, with decades of performance experience, who had been disguised as a child to create a more marketable persona. It was essentially accusing 20th Century Fox of perpetrating a massive fraud on the public. The allegations were, of course, completely unfounded. Temple was indisputably a child, born in 1928, with her age verified through birth records and her physical development tracked in public view throughout her career. What the accusations really reflected was disbelief that a child could possess such remarkable talent without some form of trickery involved. The skepticism came from a place of genuine bewilderment, explained a Temple biographer. Her performances were so polished, so technically perfect, that people unfamiliar with the realities of child performers trained from infancy couldn't believe she was genuine. Rather than accept that a child could be that talented, they constructed elaborate conspiracy theories. What makes this story particularly strange is how it highlights the unprecedented nature of Temple's fame. She was so phenomenally successful, earning $1,250 per week as a 4-year-old, equivalent to over $25,000 weekly in today's money, that her very existence challenged people's understanding of childhood, talent, and celebrity. The Vatican wasn't alone in its skepticism. Rumors about Temple being an adult in disguise circulated in various forms throughout her early career, sometimes including bizarre claims that she was actually a 30-year-old woman with a pituitary condition that prevented normal growth. These rumors got so persistent that 20th Century Fox eventually had to take the extraordinary step of publishing Temple's birth certificate and having her examined by doctors who certified she was indeed a child of her stated age, noted the film historian. It's perhaps the only time a major studio had to prove their star wasn't an adult imposter. Temple's mother contributed to the scrutiny by dressing her daughter in clothing that sometimes made her appear younger than her actual age, creating a discrepancy between her appearance and her advanced performance abilities that fueled conspiracies. The incident serves as a fascinating window into the disruptive impact Temple had on entertainment and popular culture, a performer so exceptional that some found it easier to believe in an elaborate hoax than accept that a small child could possess such remarkable talent.
Well, it certainly didn't go into this $15 million.
Well, I'm just asking you whether you didn't have
war contracts in 40.
10. Howard Hughes stored urine in jars for years. Howard Hughes, aviator, film producer, and billionaire, transformed from Hollywood mogul to reclusive eccentric in his later years, developing obsessive-compulsive behaviors that manifested in increasingly bizarre ways. Perhaps none was more disturbing than his practice of storing his own urine in mason jars, which he kept meticulously arranged throughout his living spaces. As Hughes retreated from public life in the 1950s and 60s, his peculiar habits intensified. He began living exclusively in hotel penthouses, often blackening the windows and maintaining minimal human contact. Within these darkened sanctuaries, he established a disturbing collection system for his bodily waste. He had more jars than awards, remarked a former assistant who witnessed Hughes's decline. The billionaire who once dated Hollywood's most beautiful women and produced blockbuster films was living in darkness, surrounded by jars of his own urine. He labeled them by date and insisted they never be removed. Hughes's phobia of germs paradoxically led him to live in increasingly unsanitary conditions. While refusing to touch doorknobs or shake hands for fear of contamination, he simultaneously created a biological hazard in his own living quarters by storing these jars, along with containers of his nail clippings, used tissues, and other biological materials. The contradictions were stunning, explained a biographer who studied Hughes's mental decline. He was terrified of germs from the outside world, but seemingly unbothered by his own waste products. He would use tissue paper to avoid touching objects, but then save the used tissues in labeled boxes. It was as though he saw his own bodily products as somehow safe compared to external contaminants. What makes Hughes's behavior particularly notable is how it contrasted with his earlier life as a handsome, successful Hollywood figure who dated stars like Katharine Hepburn and Ava Gardner. The man who had once been at the center of the film industry's social scene transformed into someone who couldn't bear human contact. The hoarding of bodily waste wasn't limited to his later years. According to multiple accounts, this behavior began while Hughes was still actively running his business empire, though it intensified dramatically as his mental health deteriorated. Hotel staff would find these jars hidden throughout his suites, said a former hotel manager who oversaw one of Hughes's extended stays. Sometimes in closets, sometimes behind furniture. When they attempted to remove them during cleaning, Hughes would become agitated and threaten to have them fired. Eventually, special protocols were established: clean around the jars, but never touch them. Hughes' behavior exemplified what modern psychiatrists would recognize as severe, untreated obsessive-compulsive disorder, likely combined with other mental health conditions and the effects of injuries sustained in multiple plane crashes. Yet in an era before modern understanding of such disorders, Hughes's eccentricities were often dismissed simply as the bizarre whims of a reclusive billionaire. The tragedy of Hughes's story lies in how his immense wealth enabled his deterioration rather than his recovery. With unlimited resources and staff who followed his instructions without question, there were no practical limitations on how far his compulsions could progress, leading to living conditions that would have been intervened upon in almost any other context.
Yeah? Oh, I'm afraid I don't remember. You see, we have so many men come in.
11. Joan Crawford had a Pepsi machine installed in every home. Joan Crawford's marriage to Alfred Steele, CEO of Pepsi-Cola, in 1955, wasn't just a union of Hollywood and corporate America. It was the beginning of one of celebrity endorsement's most extreme manifestations. Crawford didn't just promote her husband's product, she literally integrated it into every aspect of her home life in ways that left visitors speechless. After marrying Steele, Crawford demanded that functioning Pepsi vending machines be installed in every residence she maintained, not just in convenient locations like kitchens or entertainment rooms, but in virtually every space, including her bedroom. The soda never stopped. Neither did the ego, recalled a frequent visitor to Crawford's homes during this period. You'd be having a conversation in her bedroom, and there in the corner would be a fully operational Pepsi machine humming away. She'd offer you a bottle as casually as if every bedroom naturally came equipped with soda dispensers. What made Crawford's Pepsi obsession particularly notable wasn't just the unusual home decor, but her insistence that guests partake. Visitors reported that declining a Pepsi when offered was considered a personal affront, with Crawford known to become visibly agitated if someone requested water, or worse, a competitor's beverage. She took it as a direct insult if you didn't want Pepsi, explained a former Hollywood colleague who visited Crawford's home multiple times. It wasn't just a drink to her, it was an extension of her identity, her marriage, her brand. Refusing Pepsi was, in her mind, rejecting her. After Steele's death in 1959, Crawford's dedication to Pepsi intensified rather than diminished. She secured herself a position on Pepsi's board of directors and became a brand ambassador, ensuring that her connection to the company outlived her marriage. The in-home vending machines remained, now serving as shrines to both her late husband and her corporate allegiance. It was bizarre but also somewhat touching, noted a biographer who studied Crawford's later life. The Pepsi machines were partly about maintaining her connection to Steele after his death, but they were also about power and control, creating an environment where her preferred beverage was the only option available to anyone in her space. Crawford's Pepsi devotion extended beyond her homes to her public appearances. She reportedly traveled with cases of the soda and would refuse to be photographed with any other beverage. At restaurants, she would bring her own Pepsi, rather than accept whatever cola the establishment served. What makes this story particularly revealing is how it highlights the intersection of Crawford's personal and professional identities. Unlike modern celebrities who might casually endorse products while maintaining separation between their public and private lives, Crawford literally incorporated Pepsi into her most intimate spaces. Today's celebrities might tweet about using a product or appear in commercials, but Crawford literally lived the brand 24/7, explained a marketing historian. She turned her homes into Pepsi showcases and made consumption of the product a test of loyalty for anyone who entered her world. It was corporate sponsorship taken to a psychological extreme. When Crawford died in 1977, her commitment to Pepsi remained evident throughout her home, the vending machines standing as aluminum monuments to one of Hollywood's most unusual brand loyalties. Stranger than fiction, the reality behind Hollywood's golden facade. These 11 bizarre stories from old Hollywood reveal something fundamental about the entertainment industry's golden age, the extraordinary gap between carefully manufactured public images and the strange, sometimes disturbing realities that existed behind studio gates. What makes these tales particularly fascinating isn't just their bizarre nature, but how successfully they were concealed from the adoring public for decades. In an era before social media, smartphone cameras, and tabloid culture, studios maintained nearly absolute control over their stars' public personas. Professional publicists crafted narratives that bore little resemblance to reality, while compliant entertainment journalists rarely challenged the official versions they were fed. The result was a carefully maintained fantasy world that audiences eagerly embraced. What's perhaps most revealing about these stories is how they demonstrate that celebrity eccentricity isn't a modern phenomenon. Today's social media often presents unusual celebrity behavior as something new, a product of our current fame culture. Yet Howard Hughes storing his urine in jars, Errol Flynn sleeping in a coffin, and Marlene Dietrich demanding ice from Paris reveal that bizarre behavior has always accompanied fame and fortune. The only difference is how well it could be hidden. These stories also highlight the genuine dangers that lurked behind Hollywood's magical productions. From the MGM lion that nearly killed its handlers to the toxic Wizard of Oz, set that poisoned and injured its performers, early Hollywood prioritized spectacular results over human safety in ways that would be unthinkable today. The beautiful images captured on film often came at a disturbing human cost that audiences never suspected. Perhaps most importantly, these tales remind us that the nostalgic glow surrounding old Hollywood conceals a reality that was often darker, stranger, and more complex than the perfect images projected on theater screens. The stars who appeared so flawless and glamorous on film were, in reality, human beings with peculiarities, problems, and pathologies that their studios worked overtime to conceal. Hollywood has always been in the business of manufacturing dreams, noted a film historian who specialized in the studio era. These bizarre true stories remind us that dreams require a certain amount of selective forgetting, choosing not to see the messy, strange reality behind the perfect illusion.